I talked to Daryl Rundis this morning. We found out why udonews.com went down. It got hacked out of the Netherlands. So he's getting that back up. Appreciate Daryl Rundis and all his great work. Okay, I'm going to do a few more minutes with Dr. Bruce E. Levine. Really appreciate him joining us. The website's www.brucelevine.net, Levine. And really interesting info. I probably agree with about 95% of what he's talking about. The point is, Veritas is Veritas. It is common sense. And I've read the establishment's books about how they're manipulating us. They get off on the power of just being able to lie to you and you accepting it. And they like it even more if you just drop out and don't resist them. That's why they're setting the precedent to lie and lie and lie. But talking about psychiatry, the psychological system, from the inception, it was set up to control society. It was used by the Nazis and the Soviets and the communist Chinese and our country, and eugenics was run by the psychiatrists in many respects to sterilize people. And you know, the highest rate of suicides of any profession from the numbers I've seen are psychologists and psychiatrists. A lot of them are crazier than a you-know-what rat. I mean, and of course, there's a lot of good ones, too. I guess Jungian or, you know, other Carl Jung. And I don't even know that, I mean, I'm saying I totally agree with all that either. I'm just saying it's not all bad. But what the big corporations push and promote is the most virulent form. Because when I was talking to this John Gartner for Psychology Today, I mean, he was very childlike. I would say, so you say I'm crazy, there's no world government. I said, can I send you 100 articles, Times of London saying world government by banks? And he would just say, so you believe it's real? Are they coming to get you? And I said, look, this isn't a joke, sir. Globalization's real. And he just kept, and it's like a game. I mean, it's like a mind trick. I mean, it's like, I just don't know how to explain it, to have them, and you know they know that they're lying, but they are like the torture of Winston in 1984. It doesn't matter. They're in control. They're in the power structure, and they don't care if you're really right because they believe perception's reality. If they say 2 + 2 = 1,000,000, it does, and you're wrong if you say it equals 4. Closing comments on that third pillar, the whole psychological system.
Yeah, I think that, well, you know, you go through not just oppositional defiant disorder and anarchy. One of the things, if you want to tweak them next time, Alex, and say, how come you guys, like, had homosexuality as a mental illness up until the 1970s? Why did it get in your diagnostic Bible, the DSM, and why did it get out? Well, it got in there for purely political reasons, and it got out because a bunch of gay psychiatrists didn't like being called mentally ill. So almost everything in their pathological Bible called the DSM is in there for political reasons, okay, and it gets taken out. Very rarely things get taken out. More things get added in there. But once in a while, they do get taken out, and it's all political. And I think that, you know, one of the things that was clear to me in 10 years of hanging around in academic training, you know, getting my undergraduate degree and getting my graduate degrees, was that the two populations of people that I've met in my life that are the most compliant are school teachers and mental health professionals. And they tend to, you know, whenever they see anybody out there who's non-compliant, whether they're actively non-compliant or they're more passively non-compliant, those kind of people make them very anxious. And if you're a mental health professional, if you're a psychiatrist or psychiatrist, when you're anxious, you know, you tend to pathologize. You tend to, you know, you disease somebody. If you're a cop, you get to, you know, call somebody a criminal. And the two major ways that American society has really kind of controlled people who are trying to not
labeling.
Are criminalizing them and to pathologize them. I mean, those are two great ways to do that. And so if you're in a society, who do you want to have as your teachers and who do you want to have as your mental health professionals? Those most compliant members of society. Now, again, across the board, there are exceptions. I mentioned one teacher, John, you know, Gatto, and there are mental health professionals who are exceptions, but they are rare.
Well, let me throw this
rare.
in. Everybody remembers their favorite teacher. And I had this football coach who was also the U.S. history teacher, and later I found out he really knew what he was talking about. He was talking about big banks, gunboat diplomacy. This school's is funded and run by, you know, corporate ideas. It was a public school, you know, to make you compliant. You may want college, but for a lot of you it won't be good. It's just a way to get you in debt. And everybody loved him. But then most of the other teachers were these control freaks who got off on the structure, got off on the power. And they were threatened by anybody that even could correct them, who was a student. They reveled in being part of this hive or this Borg.
Right. The selection process for teachers, and even more so for my profession, psychologist, psychiatrist, the selection process weeds out non-compliant people, okay? And then if somebody can slip through the gates, they happen to slip through the gates because they have these great tests or whatever, and that the whole socialization process, tries to make these people feel like, I'll tell you a term that I heard over and over again was like, you have issues with authority. You have issues with authority. And, I would come back and say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, that's enough of a problem to get you kicked out of a program, whether it's a teaching program or being a psychologist. I saw it happen all the time. And some of the more courageous, critically thinking, gutsy kind of people who you would have liked to have as your counselor, those people, they just never make it all the way till the end. And that's just the way it is. There's exceptions every once in a while. There's a couple of famous psychologists, psychiatrists, people like Eric Fromm who saw all these things. And there's certain teachers like that. But overall, these are professions that socialize and select people to be very, very, very compliant. And
is it a power trip? I mean, because I've interviewed establishment psychologists and psychiatrists, and you can have the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. Well, in fact, I'm going to let you go in a second, but I want to play this short clip for you because do you guys have Tony Blair with the conspiracy theorist comments? Cue that up because I have Fox News right here and I have the UK Daily Mail about it. And he basically said, we're conspiracy theorists if we think that they lied about WMDs when everyone knows they lied about them. We have the White House and Downing Street memo. I mean, they know it's a fraud, but they use these labels. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, that's the most obvious thing where there's this obvious thing that of course they lied about WMDs. But I'll give you another one, a more personal example. When Ernest Hemingway, towards the end of his life, he was very depressed, and he started saying stuff like, I think, the FBI is listening to me. Well, he got accused then or diagnosed or labeled as being psychotically depressed, having delusions and paranoid. So not only did they drug him, but they started electroshocking them. Well, years later, people looked in, Freedom of Information Act, and because Hemingway had spent some time in Cuba, that they actually, FBI was bugging him, all right? And so, a lot
but, look, if you've sold 20 million books and worship the government, they're listening to you. All the declassified documents admit they come in and sit in big churches that aren't even political.
Right. Right, and nowadays, I mean, with so many folks who are like, in these kind of security positions, and so few people who are rebelling out there, I'm sure they've got plenty of people. They got more. They got 10 people for each one of Alex Joneses out there. They got more folks who are listening in than folks who are actually rebelling.
And they admit that. Well, I remember 5 years ago they were calling it a conspiracy theory that Bush was listening to Americans without warrants, and he said, "I promise you, I'm not doing it." Later, it came out he was lying.
Right. And on a more subtle level, even the kind of people I've talked to, on a more personal level who've been accused of being delusional and psychotic and having conspiracy theories because they're saying their spouses are trying to poison their food. Well, often that they're wrong in the exact facts that their spouse isn't trying to poison their food. But you know what? When you get into these people's lives, it turns out their spouse maybe really does wish that they would be dead, that they really don't like them. And they're not even folks, who are, there's very few folks I meet out there who are completely crazy, although they may not have exactly all the facts right.
There's usually something that's traumatized them that then triggers the paranoia.
Right, exactly.
That's what I've found, and that's how COINTELPRO works. They want us to all get paranoid. We just got to have trust, and that comes from courage, and just say, we're going to get out in the community, we're going to be involved, we're not going to let police intimidating us or provocateurs stop us. We've got to do this. Let me play this short clip, then I'll let you go. Here is Tony Blair last night on Fox News. Here it is.
I don't pretend for a moment to understand American politics very well. I certainly don't understand British politics, but why so many of these inquiries? There's been 4, and they've all been relentless. They haven't really mined any new ground. I think it's partly because we have this curious habit, I don't think this is confined to Britain actually, where people find it hard to come to the point where they say, we disagree. You're a reasonable person, I'm a reasonable person, but we disagree. There's always got to be a scandal as to why you hold your view. There's got to be some conspiracy behind it, some great, deceit that's gone on. And people just find it hard to understand.
Let's stop right there. We have all the memos. We have the Niger uranium cake, the aluminum tubes. We know Bush and Blair met, and Blair said, you can't do this, and Bush said, we're already doing it. And they said, well, how do we make something up? I mean, we know, and he just says, oh, people have to believe there's something else. They've had 4 inquiries because he keeps lying. I mean, he's caught red-handed saying we're basically mentally ill.